I understand that literally every video that I'm making at the moment is about UFC 300, but it's because UFC 300 is going to be a massive event, and we are getting so much news about this event every single day. In fact, just today, we did receive news from Dana White on a live stream on Instagram talking about the main event, which of course is going to top off the event, as well as a little bit of other information and speculation that I did want to bring in this video. The quote that we have from his Instagram live is him saying that everyone will go crazy for the UFC 300 main event, and he followed it up by saying that they've got a couple of options for the main event, but they're still yet to make the final decision. I will talk about what I think that might mean in a second. MMA Orbit posted the same thing, saying there's a couple of options for UFC 300 and that they're yet to decide which fight they're going to choose. And then I had a little bit of a back and forth with Damon Martin talking about what UFC 300 could look like, and according to him, he thinks that there is a chance that Weili Zhang versus Yan Xiaonan could be on the prelims. So if that is the case, that means that UFC 300 must be completely stacked to have a championship fight on the prelims, but I'll talk about what that might mean in a second. What I wanted to talk about is what this means, that they've got a couple of options for the main event, but they're yet to decide which one they're going to choose. And I believe if they've got two options, it's got to involve one fighter. So it's one fighter, this person could fight this person or somebody else. I don't see it being two weight classes and them just deciding which one's the main event, because they could do the main event and the co-main event with those two fights. So I think the two fights that they are kind of discussing involves Dricus du Plessis. I think one of those two options is Dricus du Plessis versus Israel Adesanya, the headliner of UFC 300. But the second option also involves Dricus du Plessis and I guess now his rival, Sean Strickland. Yes, I do believe maybe at this point in how the UFC 300 event has kind of been shaping up, they genuinely might consider Sean Strickland versus Dricus du Plessis in a rematch at the UFC 300 main event. So yes, so what we've got is there's two options, and I think by getting two options, it means that we've got two different fights that could involve the same person. Du Plessis versus Adesanya, or Du Plessis versus Strickland. Of course, I do want to throw something out there. One of those two options could involve a different weight class, and this could be it. It really could be Leon Edwards versus Bilal Muhammad in a rematch as well. But I find it hard to believe that the UFC would do Edwards versus Muhammad as a rematch for the main event. Well, not just the fact that it's a rematch. The point is just that I just don't see them doing Edwards versus Muhammad as a main event. I just can't see it happening personally. I can see this being the co-main event, and this is what I discussed with Damon Martin. Damon Martin's quote: Dana White says that they have a couple of options for the UFC 300 main event, but they haven't made a decision yet. No exact timeline for the announcement. And I replied, what happened to the confidence he had about two more title fights when he announced Yan versus Weili? Because he did. When he announced Yan versus Weili, he did bring up the idea that he had two more title fights to announce. Now, since then, the BMF title fight has been announced, and that is what 138 MMA brought up, and he does have a YouTube channel himself. If you wanted to go and support 138 MMA, he makes similar content to me on predictions. But he said, and this is a good point, he said, I think one of those two is a BMF title, unfortunately. Not that it's a bad fight, it just counts as a title. It's a great fight. It's a great fight. Don't get me wrong. But it sounded like he had two more like title fights, you know, not BMF, but defending title fights as the weight class. Damon Martin then said, the BMF title fight is definitely 5 rounds, so we could be looking at 4 title fights at UFC 300. I speculated perhaps Zhang versus Yan could headline the prelims, and I said, I would be surprised if they put Zhang versus Yan on the prelims. Would that move the Harrison versus Holm fight to the main card? And the response was from Damon Martin saying, again, I'm just guessing, but they are stacking this card even if the main event isn't a total blockbuster, which to be fair, Du Plessis versus Adesanya would be a blockbuster, but it wouldn't be a Jones versus Miocic or a Conor McGregor versus Michael Chandler, which I will throw out there. But he did say, I wouldn't be totally shocked if Zhang versus Yan gets on the prelims. It's honestly tough to say what the belt order will be. You would wager Gaethje versus Holloway is on the pay-per-view. Of course, so would I. I think Gaethje versus Holloway has a good chance of being the co-main event. to be honest. But I think it's going to be the featured fight. This is how I think that the UFC is going to do the event. I think they're going to do Gaethje versus Holloway as the feature. Edwards versus Bilal Muhammad is the co-main event. And the main event is going to involve Dricus du Plessis in some way, or John Jones in some way, or Alex Pereira in some way, or Conor McGregor in some way, which I have touched on in a different video. But I do want to say that Alex Pereira, for a while, was my personal frontrunner to be the headliner of UFC 300, as I thought there was a lot to do there. They could have done Pereira versus Hill. I know it's not a blockbuster fight, but Hill versus Pereira would have been pretty big with the massive undercard that they've got right now. Pereira versus Adesanya in the trilogy, that would be massive. That would probably be the biggest non-Conor McGregor fight I think they could pull off right now. But UFC 301 is rumored to be taking place in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, and we just got another fight announced from Joaquim Silva versus Drakkar Klose, and of course, Silva is from Brazil. There's now 2 Brazilian fighters on the same card. This could be it. This genuinely could be 301 in Brazil, headlined by none other than Alex Pereira, who, of course, is quite literally from Brazil. And we have also heard that the flyweight champion, Alejandro Pantoja, sorry, I forgot his name for a second, man. Alejandro Pantoja wants to be on the card as well. Pantoja and Pereira on a 2 title fights on the main card. That's enough for a massive card, of course, with Craig versus Baralho, and then a couple of big Brazilian names on that card as well. I think that's a good card, as is, but that's not what this video is about. It is about UFC 300, and I believe that might be the end of the video. I just wanted to bring this up, bringing up a little bit of speculation that we've got from Dana White, saying that he's brought up that the main event is going to be massive, everyone's going to go crazy for it. I will say this. If Sean Strickland versus du Plessis gets announced, I won't go that crazy for it. If Adesanya versus du Plessis gets announced as the main event, I won't go crazy for it. I would go crazy for a Conor McGregor main event at UFC 300. So there's just a little bit of food for thought at the end of the video. Let me know what you think in the comments below, and I'll see you guys in the next one.